Welcome to the HMA series related to disrupting family violence. It's great to have you here. You and I both know that family violence has emerged from behind closed doors to become one of the most challenging issues facing our communities. When we think about a person's life course, growing up either with direct exposure to violence or being the target of family violence sets the template for the rest of their lives, which will unfold over time. In this series we will explore the complexities that exist when men find themselves engaging in violence to resolve relationship issues. Finding reason to justify behaviour, a glimpse into victim stance. If you didn't, you can fill in the content. I wouldn't have. I was wasted at the time. She knows how I am, so she shouldn't have. She should be here, not me. How many times have you heard these statements when sitting with men who have engaged in abusive practices? In many ways, we shouldn't be surprised at the range of statements that position a person being abusive as the victim in the situation. I was supervising a team the other day which is delivering the HMA-designed Disrupting Family Violence program into a prison site. One of the challenging areas, and this is generally a consistent issue for facilitators and workers, is how easily participants shift to blaming others for their use of abusive practices and use of violence. So what is victim stance? We can define victim stance as where the person believes he or she is morally right, is not responsible or accountable for their actions, and is entitled to sympathy from others. Individuals with a victim stance or victim mentality feel that others are generally luckier or happier than they are. This provides an effective strategy for not stepping up and being accountable for one's behaviour. There is a world of difference between being a victim of trauma or life events that impact significantly on someone's functioning and living with a victim's mindset. The latter is best thought of as an attitude or worldview, or a schema we might call it, that shapes the way a person perceives the situation. Think of it like a lens you might attach to a camera. That lens limits what you see and how you see things. If we consider victim stance from the locus of control, how much perceived agency or ability a person has to manage behaviour, this is located externally rather than internally. In other words, rather than owning responsibility for behaviour, it is easier to locate this in the external environment, which may include blaming other people for our behaviour. This is not to deny that external issues impact upon us. It is more to do with how we interpret and respond to these. We have all at some stage probably slipped into feeling the world is unfair or against us. For most of us, this is relatively fleeting. When it becomes a way of organising our thinking about our experiences, we then have real challenges in navigating the world around us. In my experience, there are three areas where victim stance is more evident when working with men who use violence in their relationships. These include gendered, psychological and genetic. Tick off which of the following you have heard in the course of your work. Let's start gendered lens. It's a woman's world. Men don't get a fair go. It doesn't matter what I do, I'll always get blamed by her. This whole program is a beat up on men. Let's look from a psychological lens. Everybody uses violence. I just happened to got caught, which is not fair. I couldn't help it when she wouldn't give up, humbugging me. I'm a victim of circumstance. If she had left me alone, this wouldn't have happened. It's not my fault. I warned her that I get violent when she keeps nagging at me. Let's think from a genetic lens. I was beaten as a kid, so what do you expect? Our culture is a warrior one. Violence runs in the family. I don't have a choice. I just have bad blood. It's just the way it is. You can also think of statements that you have heard that reflect the victim stance and people you have worked with. In working with victim stance, our role is to assist a person to shift from an external locus to an internal locus of control, to claim agency over their reactions and situations they find themselves in, and accept responsibility for their behaviour within the situation. Let's explore several ways and how we can assist men who use violence and abuse within their relationships to give victim stance the slip. Below are 4 ways to better manage victim stance that I find useful in my practice. Firstly, respond to the context rather than the moment. Have you ever noticed that when victim stance statements are put out, that you are invited to join with blaming the other person or context? Yes, it might be true that the partner verbally abused the man, assaulted him, or attacked him. We are invited into the moment rather than the context in which retaliation may have been the result. One strategy is to become inquisitive around what led up to the situation becoming so pronounced and extreme. As we know, behaviour is contextual, built up over time, and very often patterned. Digging below the initial response, when we wonder about context, opens the space for more thoughtful dialogue. Questions such as, "That seems a really extreme behaviour. Help me understand what was happening between you and your partner in the hours before that." Secondly, explore the tenacity of the statement. The human experience is one where we need to create a narrative to explain our behaviour. In other words, we make up a story to make sense of our situation. The story will be full of errors, but they function to allow us to face ourselves in the mirror and get through the day. Let's explore this idea further. One victim stance statement might well be, "I was beaten as a kid, so what would you expect?" Think for a moment about what the person is telling us. Violence is inevitable, I can't control myself, it is who I am. We all know the function of a statement is to shift responsibility. I am more interested in taking the statement at face value and exploring the underlying meaning. Given reduction of harm as our focus, I might respond to this with this reflection. It must be frightening to know that you can never be safe with others. This will take the conversation certainly somewhere else. Thirdly, work with the contradiction. We're often inconsistent in our behaviour across different contexts. Someone takes a victim stance position through a statement such as, "I was beaten as a kid, so what would you expect?" Then one way is to invite the person to reflect upon the behaviour across different contexts. Many men who use abusive practice in their relationship do not act abusively in public, such as work, peer group, or other social settings. If there is an inevitability, we would expect that behaviour to be consistent across time and place. Rather than lack of control, is about reflecting upon where the man chooses to exercise control. Fourthly, developing consistent responses across time and place. Have you ever heard the phrase, "It's a woman's world, men don't get our fair go"? We live in a time where we see significant pushback on the gendered project of equality between men and women. As men, we have been asked consistently during the last 30 years to step up in our relationships with women and men and explore what true partnership looks like. Many men continue to struggle with the idea that entitlement is now something to be negotiated rather than seen as normal. The idea that entitlement is paired with responsibility is an interesting conversation to pursue. Many men will come to programs feeling a sense of injustice around the situation. One strategy is to explore the idea of how they see relationships. I like to play with the notion of the operating system for a relationship. As we know, some operating systems, such as those used in computers, need lots of patches to keep them operating. Others just don't work that well. Working with a metaphor around operating system that will give relationships the best chance of success becomes an interesting conversation in itself. I often wonder that the statement, "It's a woman's world," reflects men wanting to return to an operating system based around male privilege and female subservience. It can feel like an uphill struggle sometimes to constantly invite men in programs to move away from an external locus of control to an internal one and give victim stance thinking the slip. These are my ideas for working with victim stance and men who engage in abusive practice in their relationships. I'd love to hear your ideas. Let's talk further.